In light of new reports from on the ground in Bucha, Congress is continuing to work on its own sanctions legislation geared at the Putin regime. But like a lot of things on the Hill these days, it's stuck in a legislative logjam. Joining me now is California Democratic Congressman Khanna. Thank you so much for joining me, Congressman. Appreciate it. Of course, we are all focused on these atrocities, these horrifying images that are coming out of Bucha. And President Biden today said that he is now working on new sanctions. President Zelensky said that just does not go far enough. What is your take, and should the U.S. go further and give Zelensky what he's been asking for, the Polish fighter jets, for example?
Well, the images are horrific. They are war crimes. I mean, brutal targeting of civilians. It's horrific that this is happening in the 21st century. We need more punishing sanctions that are going after more of the oligarchs. Only about 12 of them have had assets seized, and that are going after more people other than Putin who are responsible for these atrocities. And we need to get Ukraine more weapons. We've already provided them anti-tank, anti-aircraft missiles. We need to get them more missiles, more planes, more tanks that they need. And the United States, as I understand it, is helping other allies get those weapons to Ukraine.
Congressman, President Zelensky says, though, all of those steps, including the military aid to date, just has not gone far enough. One of the other big things that we've heard Zelensky call for is a no-fly zone. You have been very clear that you're opposed to that, but is there any circumstance under which you would support a no-fly zone? I know last month you called it a euphemism for an air war against Russia, but is your view changing?
Well, first, let's be clear what the United States has done. No country in the world has done more than the United States. It's our weapons that have allowed the Ukrainians to put up the heroic fight that they have. So I'm very proud of—
And yet, Congressman, it hasn't changed Putin's equation one bit. He has continued to move forward, and now these new atrocities that we have all seen. So has the U.S. done enough?
Well, I think it has prevented Putin from rolling over Ukraine. If it weren't for our weapons there, and if it weren't for the president's leadership, the experts said that Putin was going to roll over the entire country in 2 weeks. And now it's the Ukrainian heroism, but I think President Zelensky would be the first to acknowledge that this president has stood strong, that his weapons and his leadership in the world has made the difference. Can we do more? Yes, we should get more weapons, but it would be irresponsible for us to get into a shooting war with Russia. And that's what a no-fly zone is. So I do not think that that would be a prudent move. And I respect that the president is doing everything possible short of committing American troops, American airmen and women in a war with Russia.
Congressman, you talked about sanctioning more oligarchs. There are other steps the U.S. can take when it comes to the SWIFT financial system. For example, there are other financial institutions that could be kicked out of SWIFT. There are secondary sanctions that could be done. What specifically do you want to see on a broader scale that goes beyond just sanctioning oligarchs that you think could potentially take a big bite?
I do think we ought to look at getting more of the Russian economy off of the SWIFT system, that could be punishing. But we also need to call on Europe and Germany to stop buying the Russian oil. I mean, the reality is, as long as you have other countries providing a market for Russians, it's very difficult to bring Russia's economy to its knees. And so one of the things the president is doing, and we need to continue to do, is to put pressure on Europe and our other allies not to engage in commerce with Russian oil and other Russian key industries.
But as you know, that is a very tough sell because they are so dependent on Russian oil. What about some of the other countries who've been on the sidelines? Saudi Arabia, Israel. What does the U.S. need to do to get them to engage and pressure Putin to back down?
Well, with the Saudis, we should first tell them to stop bombing Yemen and stop a calamity that is just as bad as Putin's calamity in Ukraine. And frankly, the Saudis continue to show us such disrespect after our alliance with them. I think Israel is being part of the process of trying to wind this war down. But our allies like India and Israel, the collective world and NATO need to see what we can do to isolate Russia economically. The reality is the United States isn't enough if Russia can have alternative markets.
I want to turn to November. We are running a little tight on time, and I want to ask you about something that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said yesterday to Chuck on Meet the Press about the Democratic Party in the midterms. Take a listen.
from my perspective, President Biden is doing a very good job. I think that his handling of Ukraine, passing the American Rescue Package, the huge infrastructure package. I'm not quite sure what the disconnect is between the accomplishments of the administration and this Congress and the understanding of what's been done and the impact it will have on the American public. We've got a great story to tell, and we need to get out there and do a better job of telling it.
Do you agree with Secretary Clinton? Do Democrats need to do a better job of telling their story? Is it simply about messaging, or is it that inflation and those headwinds are just incredibly strong right now?
I agree with Secretary Clinton 110%. We need to stop the self-flagellation, the equivocation, the qualification as Democratic messengers. We need to be proud of what we've done. We have record job creation, 3.6% unemployment. Wages in this country are going up. We have an infrastructure bill that we've passed that people haven't seen for decades, and that's going to help build this country for the next 10 years. The president has helped win against Russia. Russia is retreating, and we are turning the corner on COVID. Can we come together as a Democratic Party and tell the story and look at the investment in Ohio and revitalization of the Midwest? So I think Secretary Clinton is absolutely right. The Democrats, we have a tendency to self-doubt, self-question. We need to tell people what we've achieved, what this president has achieved.
All right, Congressman Khanna, we rarely see 110% agreement in Washington, so we appreciate it. Appreciate all of your insights this afternoon. Thanks for joining us. And still